So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, that is Certified Business Analysis Professional, and my name is Varun Pawar. So far, what we have discussed and learned about is strategy analysis and the first three activities, which is define current state, analyze current state, define future state, and then we are on third activity, which is assess risk. So this table is, again, I'll keep repeating this table. So first, analyze current state, where the inputs were need and elicitation result confirmed, and the output was current state description and the business requirement. Business requirement was the input for a defined future state, and the output we are getting is business objectives, future state description, potential value. And then now we are discussing here is on assess risk. Assess risk is basically analyze the risk, and the inputs is potential value, which is the output of our second activity. Then influencers, external and internal, elicitation results confirmed, design prioritized, requirements prioritized, and business objective. Business objective is again the output of the second activity, that is define future state. And the output we were getting is risk analysis result. So let's jump to, so this again, this example you are familiar with. Let's try to find out wherever you can find the risk in this example. So we are in from point A to we are going to point B, and these are the initial business requirements or the issues that the application was facing. And then we said like we will come up with these many future state descriptions or future states, and will then move to the future state. So what are the risks you can identify here? So assume since this requirement came when we were saying like application failure to improve the user satisfaction, to increase the users, and to increase the revenue. So what if revenue does not increase due to ABC reason? What if user does not increase? What if user is still dissatisfied? And what if the application for which we are working is not accomplished? So these are the risks associated, and risk is not something that is already been identified. These are there are various uncertainties, unknowns that can occur at any interval of time, while you are developing an application, while you are in a future state, or while you are analyzing. So anytime risk can occur. So assume if the multiple application servers, uh, where you were projecting like the potential value of 3 million euro will uh, you will achieve at the end. But what if this 3 million euro is not achieved? So this could be one of the risk associated. Stakeholders are there who actually validate and give a final sign off for the requirements. What if the assumptions of the stakeholders assume that you agreed with 1, 2, 3, 4 doing these four, but what if stakeholders as assumption is like if you do four, the fifth will be accomplished automatically? So that's one of the risk associated, that assumptions. It could be possible that there are constraints like the budget, schedule. Um, these could be one of the constraint, and that can come as a risk later on. Suppose the budget is over, or the sponsor who is having stakes on the project say, oh, I don't have money now, I cannot spend more. So that could be one of the risk. It could be possible like the third party could be like a regulator, um, comes up with a new rules and regulations which ultimately impact the application. So this could be one of the risk. So there are everywhere a risk is being there. It's about how you are identifying and analyzing those risks is a major work done by the business analyst. So this is just for your example to quote. Um, let's move to the next slide. So assess risk is means analyze risk. The purpose of assess risk is to understand the undesirable consequences of internal and external forces on the enterprise during a transition to or once in the future state. Assessing risk includes analyzing and managing them. Risk might be related to the current state, desired future state, a change itself, a change strategy, or any task being performed by the enterprise. So, as I said, like everywhere there is a risk. It's a matter of time how the business analyst looks things and identify the risk. So once the risk is identified, you can see like possible consequences if the risk occurs. So what are the possible consequences if the risk occurs? Impact of those consequences, likelihood of the risk, and potential time frame when the risk might occur. So all those points being captured in one document that is known as risk register. You will come across this terminology while you are reading through the BABOK. And this risk register comprises of all those components, which is possible consequences if the risk occurs. Uh, it could be like there is one column that would say the probability of the risk. The second one is the impact of the risk, the likelihood of the risk, that is again the probability, potential time frame for the risk might occur, that at what time or this would occur. Then there is impact in terms of the cost, in terms of the efforts, in terms of the potential value. These are the impact you have to mention in that risk register. And then you have to rank down like risk 1, 2, 3 as per the priority. Then this is risk treatment. If suppose the risk you have identified, so what treatment you can give to risk? How? What is the next course of action if a risk occurs? So first try to understand like opportunities as a positive risk. So it's not like risk is always negative. There are something that we say opportunities which may be unknown, undesirable, and can occur at any interval of time during the change, or once you are in a future state, or while you are doing a transition. Opportunity could arise that could be a positive risk, but in terms of BABOK, risk is always associated with the negative impact. So whatever the negative things will happen, these are considered as a risk. But on the other side, opportunities is something that we consider as a positive risk. So what treatments you can give to the risk? Well, you can accept the risk, you can transfer the risk, you can avoid, you can mitigate it, you can increase. So what type of risk can be accepted? We can talk about the example. So let's assume that the application that you have developed and the tester has done testing of all the features, and you are now very much to say, okay, everything is fine, no more risk, and the application will be smooth while it go on production. So there would be no failure. So after ensuring that everything is fine working in a staging environment, and now you are good to go on a production, so that is like you are very much ensured nothing will happen, that sort of thing. But there are unforeseen changes, uh, like the data you do not test the data, rather you are just testing the functionality part and non-functionality part. But what if the undesirable or unidentified data comes into picture, which is ultimately breaking the application? And this can be tested only on production, because there is a all sort of information and data available. But you didn't capture that, you didn't um, identify it as a risk. So you are accepting it, because knowingly, unknowingly, intentionally, unintentionally, you you prepare for that. So suppose application is being pushed to the production, and on production some unknown um, things happen, which ultimately breaks the application. So you have accepted the risk, and then what you did, since there is a help desk or the support team who is looking around that, there could be a chances that that issue would be fixed, that unidentified data might be removed from the application, or the third option would be to roll back the changes, right? So if the changes is being rolled back, so you would be, or the user would be, deprived of the potential value that is going to be achieved once the changes would be on a production. So rollback means that for that time frame, for which time, for that time frame when the changes is being rolled back and pushed again after the correction, that time frame where the business is being lost. So the potential loss is being identified there, and for that you were prepared, so you have accepted that risk. The second is transferred. Risk can be transferred. Uh, Assume this way that you have taken a third party insurance, and suppose you owned a franchisee, and in that franchisee you have a asset of around 2 million euros, and suddenly there is a short circuit which ultimately burn down the entire franchisee or a office. So there is a loss of around 2-3 billion euros. So, but in advance you have taken up a insurance for your franchisee. So what will happen, that whatever the cost is incurred or been burnt or is lost will be claimed from the insurance company. That is how you are securing so the risk. So this is risk transfer. Then avoid. To avoid, ultimately avoiding the risk is something example that just assume there is a Ukraine war going on, and a big brand want to open their franchisee in Ukraine, which is of around again 2-3 billion euros. But the organization know about that if they open the franchisee over there, there are very less chances that it will run, and will people will go there, because you are in a war zone, and in a war zone I don't think so things will work there. So what you are doing is you are ultimately not willing to open the franchisee there in Ukraine. So that's how you are avoiding the risk. Then it's mitigate the risk. So mitigate is something, the workaround you prepared. You know that you know that risk might or might not occur, but if that occurs, you have a failover thing, or you have a workaround to fix that. For example, suppose the application is running, but you do have a failover servers for that. If one server goes down, the failover servers immediately activates, and it works smoothly, so that no user face any problem or breakage, or uh, during the regular use of application. So one server goes down, another server's activated. So this is how you mitigate the risk. Then increase. What risk you increase? Increase, we are talking about the opportunities. So only the opportunities which are the positive risk, you always seek to increase that risk. So how you are going to increase that risk? For an example, Suppose your brand value, if your turnover reaches up to 100 million euros, then as per the regulation, you would be getting, you are ready to go for the IPO, initial public offering, where the sponsors or stakeholders or shareholders would come and sponsor your organization or the project. So you are trying to increase that positive risk by increasing try chances of the increasing turnover by more sales, more revenue, right? So you are increasing that positive risk to exploit more opportunities, more revenue in future, and you are expecting like more sponsors will come and back up your project. Then we have this chart and the flow, which talks about the inputs, output, and the activity itself. So these are the 6 inputs. Along with this, we have 7 guidelines and tools. So let's all of them, guidelines plus inputs, are considered as an input for assess risk. So business analysis approach, this is basically the output of BAPM, business analysis planning and monitoring, the very first activity in that knowledge area. And business analysis approach tells about how to, for every activity in the in a BABOK, how to approach is being guided by the business analysis approach. So it tells about how to do anything, how to analyze, how to do, how. So this um, how business analysis approach talks about how to analyze. Since we are talking about the risk, so it will tell you how to analyze the risk. Then business policies guides or governs the risk management, how the risk will be managed. Then change strategy. So in change strategy, you will come to know about the risk associated with the change strategy. Current state description itself lists down the risk associated with the current state. Future state description, it lists down the risk associated with the future state. Identified risk. Identified risk, it's a starting point. This means already few risk is been when you will talk about when you go through the this project charter or the business case, there are few risk that is already been identified the different stakeholders and that are listed in there. So these risk is known as identified risk, and we consider those as a starting point to analyze those risks, because once you start analyzing, then you may find more risk, but initial starting point could be, let's talk about the identified risk. So these are the starting point to do analysis. Stakeholder engagement approach, this is the second activity, output of the second activity in BAPM knowledge area, which is stakeholder engagement. And stakeholder engagement itself tells about the risk that we have to manage different stakeholders. We'll talk about that. There is a 4 quadrant, like which type of stakeholders you have to manage closely, which type of stakeholders you have to work closely, and being you have to give information, and these type of which type of stakeholder is risky to the project, and how to manage those stakeholders itself is a risk. So this stakeholder engagement approach tells about that information stakeholder. Then we have inputs, influencers, internal and external. So assume that there is a third party, which we say regulator, that's a government who regulates the laws and the guidelines for any organization to work in their ecosystem. So assume that the regulator has changed their policies and laws and which ultimately will impact the organization way of working. So that is one of the risk, that it could defeat the purpose, how you are your potential, how you will achieve your potential value. Then internal influencers could be the for an example, the resources within your organizations, the the budget constraint, the time constraint. So these are the internal influencers which might impact. Suppose the stakeholder itself, that the one or two of the stakeholders is leaving the project, and these could be one of the risk. Then the elicitation result. So you have gone through the elicitation activity, and you have got the result. Within that result itself, you also try to find the risk association, and these risk is one of the input for analyzing the risk. Design prioritized. Suppose you have four different prototypes based on the requirement, and you have prioritized like design 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have frozen, like the design 1 will go, but due to some constraint, design 1 is been rejected and design 3 is been considered. So that's one of the risk. So when I'm talking about the design is basically nothing, just a you can say the prototype of any solution. The requirements prioritized, the same thing, that is like 1 to 10. There are 10 requirements, and the 10 requirements prioritized, ranking like 1, 2, 3, 4. And what if any of the requirements prioritization has been changed from 1 to it reaches to 5? Then that's one of the risk, because the potential value associated with that risk is already been calculated, and it's been based on the prioritization is been secured, that okay, this much potential value we are going to achieve. But what if the prioritization of that requirement has been changed? The business objective itself, like the organization has in mind to achieve something, the big goals, and what if that has been changed? And the potential value itself, at the end, what you are going to achieve, the calculated potential value, and there are the chances that you would not able to achieve that potential value due to ABCD reasons. So that is also one of the input for assessing the risk. So you finally assess, analyze the risk, and what you are getting ultimately the risk analysis result. And the risk analysis result is one of the input for other activities down there. We'll talk about these activities later on, but not now. Let's move to the next slide. So now the elements. So what are the elements of this activity? Unknowns. So unknowns, uncertain events. So anything could happen at any time, which is not known to you. So these are known as unknowns. Constraints, assumptions, dependencies. So constraints could be like the budget, right? The quality is one of the constraint that it different it differs for person to person. For me, what I'm considering as a quality would be different for other person. So this is a non-functional requirement. So that could be one of the area where the risk may occur. So cost, quality, schedule, resources. So everywhere this risk can come. Assumption, as I said, like might be the stakeholders who is having who you involve in early stages, give you some uh, requirements, and you have agreed with the certain requirements, but you have not communicated back like this requirement will not be done. And what happens at the end, the stakeholder assume that that requirement would be done. So that's one of the risk. Dependencies, like one requirement is dependent on other requirement, or one elicitation activity is dependent on particular stakeholder, or the entire functional dependency is on budget or resources. So any dependency could be there. Negative impact to value, quantified in financial term or in an amount of time, efforts, or other measures. I think you can understand this. Negative impact to value, something the value is at the end what you are going to achieve. You can quantify those in terms of the financial terms, that is in amount, or in terms of time, that it would impact the time. Like earlier, you were able to achieve that deadline like within 3 weeks, but it's been changed due to ABC reason, and it will take more time and will finish in 4 or 5 weeks. Then other measures could be there. Risk tolerance. This is very important from BABOK point of view, that there are different organizations who is having their risk tolerance level. So risk aversion, risk neutral, and risk seeking. So risk aversion is avoid the risk, or those who try to um, you know try to mitigate that risk in early stages, who do not want to take a risk. So these are risk aversion organizations. um, they try to mitigate the risk. They use uh, third party, transfer the risk. Risk neutral, who are ready to accept the risk. So these are the organization who try to accept the risk. Then risk seeking, who try to increase the chances of risk to occur. So these are like having, backed up by a big sponsors who is having a stake in a project, and they are ready to take a risk if they feel that they will get more benefit or revenue or capital if they take a risk. So they take more risk, like the banks, they take more risk to make more money. Then the recommendations. Obviously, based on the risk tolerance of the organization, business analysts try to analyze and recommend, like whether you can take the risk or you cannot take the risk. So based on these risk tolerance level of the organization, business analysts suggest whether pursue the benefit of a change regardless of the risk, pursue the benefits of a change while investing in reducing risk, likelihood, and or impact. Seek out the ways to increase the benefit of a change to outweigh the risk. Identify ways to manage and optimize opportunities, and do not pursue the benefits of a change. So these are the recommendation based on your risk tolerance. Well, then move to the techniques. So what are the techniques you would be using in an as risk analysis? Then the brainstorming, used to collaboratively identify potential risk for the assessment. So do remember that this statement uh, in BA examination, they might come up with like this statement, and they would let you to identify which technique is this. So some way you have to remember, or understand like what this line is saying, and you have to memorize like this is related to the brainstorming. Used to collaboratively identify potential risk for assessment, that's brainstorming. Used to capture risk associated with alternative change strategies, that is business case. Business decision analysis used to assess problems. Document analysis used to analyze existing documents for potential risk, constraints, assumptions, and dependencies. Financial analysis used to understand the potential effect of risk on the financial value of the solution. Interviews used to understand what stakeholders think might be risk and the various factors of those risks. Lesson learned used as a foundation of past issues that might be a risk. So you remember when I talked about risk register, there I said like lesson learned is a document that they follow to identify the risk. Mind mapping used to identify and categorize potential risk and understand their relationships. Risk analysis and management used to identify and manage risk. Root cause analysis used to identify and address the underlying problem creating a risk. Survey or questionnaire used to understand what stakeholders think might be risk and the various factors of those risks. Workshop used to understand what stakeholders think might be risk and the various factors of those risks. We will talk about all those techniques in detail at the end, but for now you can just go through, try to understand and try to relate how this technique is helping you out to identify and analyze the risk. So who are the stakeholders that you involve in risk analysis? DSME, domain subject matter expert, it provides you input for the risk assessment. Implementation subject matter expert, it also provide input to the risk assessment. With the project manager, basically project manager manage and mitigate the risk. Regulator, risk associated with the adherence. This is means the regulator is like the laws, policies, regulations. So regulator control all those. A sponsor, sponsor should know risk as his funding. So sponsor is the one is the very first person who is having a very high stake in the project, and before funding the project he knows what type of risk he is going to face, so he secure the project based on those risks. If he thinks that the risk is outweigh the benefit, so he don't invest in that. But if he feel okay, the risk can be mitigated and the benefits are more, so he funds the project. Supplier could be a risk itself. Supplier is any third party who is supporting the project. It could be kind of like the manufacturing unit, and you are getting the raw material from the third party vendor. Suppose the vendor itself, vendor is not capable enough to provide the raw material, so that vendor itself a risk. So supplier could be a risk itself. Tester, identify risk during validation. So during testing, the tester could find risk. So tester is an important stakeholder. Operational support, they can find risk as they work. So operational support is a help desk that can find the risk, like when they are pushing the changes to the production, and while doing the sanity testing they could identify the risk and they can either fix that, take roll back the changes or do the fix or something. So that's it about the risk analysis, and hope you understand this activity, this knowledge area, and we'll continue with the strategy analysis and the last activity in this knowledge area, which is change strategy, and we'll talk about that in our next session. I'll be waiting for your questions and queries, and I'll happy to answer all those. Thanks for watching this video. I'll connect you in our next video. Till then, thanks and goodbye.